Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Cleantech, a roundup of the week's biggest stories you need to know in climate and clean energy in 15 minutes or less. Today is Friday, August 9th, 2024. I'm Renewable Energy World Editor-in-Chief John Engel. Casey Crowhart from MIT Technology Review is returning to the show in just a moment. But for now, I'm joined by Cleantech PR veteran Mike Casey of Tigercom. Hello, Mike.
Hi, John Engel. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm excited for my favorite part of the week, which is seeing your shining face across the screen from me.
I got to tell you, on the LinkedIn post on the last episode, I gave you a shout out for parenting while we did this tape.
I almost forgot about that,
brother. You did a masterful job.
Thank you.
Masterful job.
Well, and it might have been confusing to the audience because our producer, Brian Mendez, did such a good job isolating the audio and cutting out the daddy, daddy, daddy in the background. So when I was apologizing or referencing a 2-year-old, I probably just sounded crazy, which may have benefited the show in the long run. But I will not have to be doing the stiff arm off camera this episode. And for that, I'm very happy. So we appreciate all of our listeners weighing in each week and sending over those article recommendations and nominations for Cleantech of the Week. You can do that as well at rew@clarionevents.com, and we will have a link in the episode description. All right, Mike, get us started.
Miranda Jayat-Rem, I hope I pronounced that right, and Sigal Kishan of Bloomberg titled, Red State Republicans Say They'll Defend Biden-Era Green Jobs.
Yeah, here we go. Donald Trump has promised to dismantle the Inflation Reduction Act if he gets into office, but the substantial investments from the bill, especially in red states, make it unlikely that there will be support to kill it, especially from communities seeing brand new jobs from EV gigafactories or other manufacturing facilities. Some GOP leaders and lawmakers in red states agree they will defend the IRA if Trump wins the election. Even Republican Tennessee Representative Chuck Fleischmann, with a new battery facility in his district, agreed to brief a potential second Trump administration on battery technology benefits. Look at that, Mike.
I'm going to cite an interesting number I read this morning. Americans have already utilized $8 billion in tax credits on home energy upgrades since the IRA was passed. And I think to me that shows that this new industrial policy is becoming embedded in the business landscape, even though public awareness of it has certainly lagged. So I think with 325 new clean energy projects announced across 41 states and Puerto Rico, the IRA is getting deeply established in these communities. When the awareness begins to catch up to that presence, that's where I think it's going to be hard for a President Trump to find enough people in Congress to go along with him. John, story number 2.
Yeah, our second story is by Will Wade and former guest of the show, Mark Chediak of Bloomberg, titled Former Rooftop Solar Giant SunPower Files for Bankruptcy. Interesting week here, Mike.
I think so. I think Chediak is going to be on the Mount Rushmore of This Week in Cleantech. Nicola Groom's going to be up there. You got Chediak. I'm just saying the people like we're talking about, Fred Dvorak, they're Tim
McDonald, Semaphore.
Yes, there's 4. So we only have one more presidential-like journalist we can put up there. We'll have to
Casey Crowhart. She'll be here in just a couple of minutes.
You are such a ring.
Listen, Mike. That's how you host a podcast. You know that the reporter who is off camera waiting to join the show needs to also get her flowers for joining said show.
You're such learning. An apple polisher.
All right. Okay. Keep going. So SunPower filed for bankruptcy. Let's not bury the lead here. Go on.
This is your fault. This burst of laughing is your fault. I want to be clear about that. All right. The entire clean tech sector has dealt with inflation and higher interest rates, but rooftop solar has seen even more challenges, with net metering rules in California being gutted on Gavin Newsom's watch. Now, one rooftop solar's largest companies went bankrupt. It carries about $2 billion in long-term debt. Last week, the shares fell down 48%, reaching a record low of 33 cents. I've said it before on the show. I'm going to say it now. Gavin Newsom is going to have opponents in the future who will call him out for overseeing the carnage that has resulted from net metering getting gutted. Californians now pay some of the highest rates for power, and you've taken away their ability to save money by generating their own electricity. That spill has stained his carpet, perhaps permanently. That remains to be seen. John?
Yeah, one of the interesting things here is that we've heard about a number of mom and pop solar shops in California that have shut down as a result of NEM 3.0. For one of the biggest in the country, in the world, to go under, I think is remarkable in looking at that piece of policy. And, you know, just to say very clearly, SunPower still had a very important legacy on this industry and will be remembered for that. I saw Intersect Power CEO Sheldon Kimber wrote a note on LinkedIn yesterday or today, just speaking to the Powerlight folks and the Dan Sugars of the world, that without SunPower, this industry wouldn't be where it is. They agreed to sell their assets to Complete Solaria for $45 million and recently asked the court to approve that deal by the end of September. So the SunPower as we know it is no more, but surely had a huge impact on this space and industry. Mike, our third story.
Our third story, Susanna Twydale from Reuters. It's called Around a Third of Carbon Credits Fail the New Benchmark Test. John?
Ooh, yeah, there have always been doubts about if carbon credits actually help companies reach their pollution targets, and this just solidifies those doubts. So there's this new standard that aims to serve as the global benchmark for the voluntary carbon market, and 236 million carbon credits, which make up 32% of the market, did not reach this benchmark. All of these carbon credits were linked to renewable energy projects. The issue is that these credits didn't prove that they led to additional carbon reductions beyond what would have happened anyway. Mike.
Yeah, boy, I tell you, talk about a tree that's hard to get the arms wrapped around. Carbon credits. Market integrity. It is so important when it comes to carbon credits. It not only impacts the amount of carbon pollution that gets cut, it also threatens, when it doesn't go well, it threatens the perception of carbon reduction efforts overall. Plus, there has been a drop in credits. Last year, renewable energy offsets fell by 69% to an average of $3.88 per metric ton. Investors might be less willing to fund projects if they anticipate lower returns from carbon credits. I'm a little worried about this one, John. You can put me down in that category. What do you think is our of our fourth story, sir?
Yeah, Energy News Network published a piece titled "Indiana's Dependence on Coal is Costing Ratepayers Millions and Holding Back Clean Energy Growth." What'd you think?
So I think I mentioned this several weeks back. We talked about the practice of self-dispatching, and here's Exhibit A. So Indiana ratepayers spend millions of dollars per year for power from coal plants, despite having more economic options available, like wind and solar. Outdated electricity market rules often let utility-owned plants keep operating these coal plants even when they're not effective from a cost standpoint. For example, in the MISO region, limited market competition allows these coal plants to be run in a practice called self-dispatching that leaves ratepayers picking up the tab. Over 3 years across MISO, nearly 400 megawatts of wind power was curtailed in favor of more expensive coal-generated power. Natural Resources Defense Council report highlighted this issue, but a Duke Energy spokesperson argued that the report lacks important context as in instances when MISO deploys a unit for grid reliability reasons. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, so trying to figure out, is this a mix of bad decisions from utilities driven by profit motives and then utility regulators failing to hold them accountable? Like, who's holding the bag here? Power plants submit bids to supply electricity at various prices, and grid operators aim to select the least expensive sources first, least cost. However, coal plants can opt to continue operating even if their power is pricier to do so because of their slow ramp up and ramp down capabilities. So they might need to maintain a constant output to be ready when demand spikes. But typically coal plants that sell power on the open market will only operate when the market prices exceed their costs. Similarly, vertically integrated or publicly owned coal plants operate when they know their costs will be covered by ratepayers. So despite their claimed inability to adjust quickly, these plants often manage to ramp up their output efficiently when their power is in high demand, indicating they may be overstating their limitations. It seems to me like utilities are keeping their old expensive coal plants open longer than they should, or at least that's what it looks like. All right, Mike,
Yep.
Number 5.
Last story, written by our returning guest, Casey Crowhart from MIT Technology Review. Your future air conditioner might act like a battery. Casey, welcome back. So nice to have you. We want people to read your story if they have not yet. What's the big takeaway?
The big takeaway is that I'm starting to see this interesting trend where we see cooling systems trying to include their own version of energy storage. We know that there tends to be this peak demand during the summer months in the late afternoon, early evening. We see solar dropping off the grid, and everybody's flipping on their lights and TVs when they get home. And so electricity is expensive. It's often also kind of more fossil fuel heavy. And so in an effort to sort of alleviate that, we see some really interesting technologies trying to basically be able to charge up at other times during the day and then deliver cooling power when it's needed.
Casey, I am the de facto new tech skeptic on this show, and will typically roll my eyes. But is this being done anywhere? Has it been deployed?
Great question, and a very fair stance to take. So we're starting to see sort of...
See, Mike? You can't just run toward every shiny object that you see in front of you. No! Okay. All right. Sorry, Casey.
No, it's fine. It's like I said, it's a great question. We're starting to see kind of early installations of this. So in my story, I wrote about two companies. We have Nostromo Energy and Blue Frontier. So Nostromo is deploying what they call their ice brick, which basically just uses, water that they freeze and thaw in order to store energy. They have a system out in California that they've deployed with a couple of hotels out there, and that has been running for over a year now. And then Blue Frontier says that they have about 4 or 5 of their systems running with customers in tests, and they're working on kind of larger scale production now. So definitely early stages, and they say that they want to go kind of beyond these early commercial deployments, but starting to see it.
Casey, your reporting, did it leave you generally optimistic about the ability to scale these systems throughout more perhaps of the Sun Belt?
I think so. I think especially because the companies that I included in this story are using very available materials. I think that's always just such a key thing for me is it's not anything that's super dangerous. Like Blue Frontier is using basically concentrated salt solution and kind of heat pumps and different very off the shelf components. Nostromo's using water. So I don't know. I came away with, they'll definitely face kind of all of the struggles that any company faces when they try to scale up production. But I didn't see any huge kind of limiting factors here.
Casey, last one. I'm starting to see a Cleantech reporting format of your blank appliance could soon act like a battery. What is going on here? I've seen stoves, ovens. There's clearly momentum in this space and some pretty significant fundraising that's taking place as well.
Absolutely. I saw a stove company this week that I hadn't seen before do the same thing. Yeah, I think there's this kind of growing realization, or maybe not realization, I think everybody knows this, that wind and solar aren't available all the time. We demand electricity at different times. And so it's just sort of this dance of like trying to make power available when we need it and introduce flexibility. I will say one thing to watch out for when we're talking about this, like, oh, your X could be a battery, is if we're talking about just ramping down power demand when it's needed. Like, that's sometimes when you see like virtual power plants, they're talking about just turning down everybody's air conditioners a little bit. So we're taking a little bit of power off the grid. That's super valid, but that's a little bit different from systems that actually incorporate energy storage and can like actually shift demand from one time to another, if that makes sense.
John, we're just about out of time. We need to go to our Clean Techer of the Week.
Yeah, and I'm biased on this one because he happens to be a friend. Our Clean Techer of the Week is Tristan Arian Larico from Theyll. Tristan has been instrumental in the release of their 2024 Theyll Module Reliability Scorecard, which now includes a top performer category for hail testing to determine who is leading in that space. So kudos to Tristan and the team for their work in educating the industry.
And I let our listener, Jermaine Ponder, know on LinkedIn that we are open to bribes for getting named Clean Tech of the Week because your day job as an Uber driver didn't work out so well, so we need to get you a new side hustle. All you have to do is Venmo me $1,500, and I'll make sure it all goes to John Engel. So, listeners...
You're such an old man. These jokes, man. I can't believe I do this show.
I'm not the one kissing Casey's ring here, putting her up in Mount Rushmore of the
whatever,
show.
Man.
You are. Okay.
Go thank our producer and our people.
I want to thank our awesome producer, Brian Mendez, and Claire Quirin, only this week because Alex Peterson had the audacity to go on vacation, and Claire had to soldier through putting these stories together for us.
And God bless Casey Crowhart and every other reporter that comes on the show. And to do it twice is, you might need to question Casey. Please subscribe, give us feedback, and share your story recommendations, and we will see you all next time.